These are Nebraska corn farmers. They work in acres, not hours, harvesting the energy and climate solutions the world needs. We are proud to stand with you.
The success of tomorrow's soy industry depends on the actions we take today. The future is here, and the time to move is now.
Market Journal Television for Agricultural Business Decisions is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources in partnership with the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. Promotional support provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine and partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board and the Nebraska Corn Board.
Well, hi everyone, I'm Brian Stuskit, and thank you for joining us today on Market Journal. Well, here we are in the heart of summer, and it's hard to believe that already half of the year has passed. It has been a busy one for us here on the Market Journal set, from the National Association of Farm Broadcasting Convention in Kansas City to the Commodity Classic event in Denver, Colorado. We've been on the road talking with producers, researchers, and industry leaders to bring you the latest information that matters most. On this week's show, we'll be taking a look back at some of our biggest and favorite stories from the first half of the year. Stick around, you won't want to miss it. Let's begin our show right here. And before the calendar turned to 2025, we had the chance to attend the National Association of Farm Broadcasting Convention, which was in Kansas City last November. While we were there, we caught up with our friends from the U.S. Custom Harvesters to get an overview of how the 2024 harvest season wrapped up across the country.
Thanks for sitting down with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Tell me about your harvest run, summer run. I suppose it starts with wheat.
Yep, yeah, summer run. So we started in North Texas this year, and which probably had the best crop we'd ever harvested in Texas. Most of the summer harvest from Oklahoma, southern Kansas was good. Western Kansas a little struggling. Nebraska had a good crop. Montana had an awesome crop again. We finished up in northwest North Dakota, and they had a respectable crop, nothing special, but it was a very good crop. From there, we returned back to southwest Minnesota, northwest Iowa, and eastern South Dakota. And eastern South Dakota had a pretty nice crop around our home area, northwest Iowa, southwest Minnesota. We were down quite a bit from normal. I'd say probably 30-40% down compared to the last 2-3 years on average. So overall, a good year, but definitely the crops struggled at home because of wet spring and dry summer.
You may start with wheat, but you've got a lot of crops you're harvesting along the way. How many different crops do you harvest?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you the number, but we do a lot of wheat, canola, lentils, field peas, chickpeas, mustard, corn, soybeans, camelina. Got a pretty good variety of stuff that we do.
Tell me about the size of your operation and the number of acres you're able to cover in a year.
We run 10 machines ourselves, all Class 8 Case H machines. We cover about 130 to 140,000 this past year, which would have probably been our biggest year we ever had.
Is that pretty standard with the industry right now?
You know, I'd say that we probably push a little harder than a lot of harvesters do, but I would say most harvesters would be that 8,000 to 9,000 per machine would be my estimate.
Whenever we visit with folks like yourself from the U.S. Custom Harvesters Inc. group, we learn about labor challenges, and a lot of them will turn to the H-2A program. You and I were visiting. You've got an American crew that you run, and you've got creative with your recruitment efforts.
Yep. So, you know, basically social media is our biggest thing that we can do. TikTok, Facebook is probably where we do the most recruiting for help. And, you know, we got a lot of employees that do a lot of TikTok. So usually people see that and they'll follow our crew. Then if they're interested, next year they start sending applications in for us.
What kinds of content are you all posting on TikTok?
Only the good stuff. The pretty pictures, the pretty sunsets, and equipment running the way it should.
Not the breakdowns.
Never the breakdowns.
That's an interesting, the labor challenge. I guess it's not a challenge per se, but you were sharing, kind of since COVID, you all have been fairly lucky in your recruitment efforts at keeping a good crew going.
Yeah, it has been. With the pandemic, it really kind of took a toll on us. It was hard to find labor. First couple years after the pandemic, it got a little bit better, but still struggled. But it seemed about a year ago, the American interest has really come back around for join the wheat harvest. And yeah, this past year was very easy finding help for us.
You run the crew with your dad, it sounds like. How have you, and how has he seen this industry change?
It's changed, the amount of harvesters that are out there, it's nothing like what it used to be. We used to go to Anthony, Kansas, or we still go there, but back when I started going there in the early 90s, there was probably 30 crews in that town. Now I think there's 3 crews. The size machines, you don't need near as many machines anymore, but it just seems like a lot of harvesters have grown in size too. So a lot of guys getting out and just don't need the machines like we used to.
Is that a decline in wheat acres in particular, or are local farmers opting to harvest on their own?
Probably a little bit of both. Wheat acres definitely down from where they used to be. Our wheat harvest is bigger than it ever has been, so it seems like we've been able to pick up wheat acres, but in general, the wheat acres are not there. And then some farmers are doing stuff themselves down south, where it used to be primarily custom harvested. You get northern states, though, where it used to all be farmer-owned machines. It seems like they're switching to a lot of custom harvesting now, too. So it's kind of changed in a lot of the areas where, they used to be predominant one way or the other.
So the common themes with our conversations this week as we're visiting at Kansas City is the downward ag economy. How has that impacted you and your operation?
It's definitely impacted us. Equipment costs has been a big issue with us. We need to up our rates, but it's hard to up our rates because downturn farmers can't afford to pay us anymore. And I understand it, and they understand our point of view too. But they might have a budget where they can hire X amount of acres done or X amount of dollars they can spend. Or a guy maybe give us 3,000 acres last year. This year he might only give us 2,000 because he just does not have the budget for it. So he can only give us a little bit. He's just got to spend more time trying to keep his costs down by doing his own stuff.
What's the best part of your job?
Finishing every year. So now the best part of my job is the farmers, the relationships you gain with them, friendships. So there's a lot of trying times, a lot of struggles, but at the end of the day, it's the farmers you get to know and basically like family. So.
Well, Paul, it's great to visit with you. What else is on your mind?
So not too much. Everything is labor industry is hard for us right now, the labor market. So if we can get any help with the new administration in D.C., it would be really good for the H2A if we can get some reform done there. That's going to be the biggest issue for farmers going forward, I believe. There's too many people removed from the farm now, so you don't get near the interest in farm kids wanting to come out and work for anyone. And the more help we can get from the legislation side in D.C. would definitely benefit us in the future.
A great conversation with Paul there in Kansas City. And of course, right now, those custom harvesters in the thick of their wheat season, working their way north across the plains as the summer months roll on. Moving along now, Nebraska has faced plenty of drought stress over the past few years. I don't need to tell you that. That's why during our visit to the UNL Gudmundsen Sandhills Laboratory, we sat down with Nebraska Extension Range Management Specialist. That's Mitch Stephenson for an in-depth look at effective rangeland management practices. Well, Mitch, I'm curious to learn about some of the research you've done as part of your time at the University of Nebraska out here at the Gudmundsen Sandhills Laboratory, in particular over the past couple of years. What have you been busy with?
Such a great resource out here to do research on. It's just such a pleasure to be out here able to test some of these things. And so we've had a few different projects that have happened over the last few years that have revolved around precision livestock management, evaluating some grazing strategies on sub-irrigated sandhills meadows, and then tracking the long-term plant biomass with our long-term grazing exposure cages. And so the precision livestock management work that we've done out here has revolved mostly around virtual fence. So really that technology has been around for quite a while, since the early 2000s. There's some research papers that have talked about it, but at a commercial scale for cattle, it's really just coming onto the market where people can purchase these collars at larger numbers. And so we've been doing some research in that space for a couple of years now, looking at its efficacy, but also evaluating things on how does this affect cattle stress, how does this affect where they graze, and how that behavior happens. And we just wrapped up a study looking at heart rate, tracking the heart rate of animals as they interact with both the audio and the electric cues of those systems, those collars that they have. And we found that they were fairly effective in keeping cattle where they were at, and that once cattle really get to learn what those cues are signifying, they're able to, one, have fewer electric cues and respond more to audio cues, but two, that their heart rates, while they do elevate, typically that elevation is for a relatively short period. We generally saw 30 seconds. The longest was about 4 minutes, but that cow stayed within an electric cueing zone for a little bit longer. And so our conclusions were that it can be an effective tool to keep cattle in. It's not going to be 100% all the time. So you probably want a good perimeter fence, but that it can be effective in managing where they graze, and that the likelihood that it causes long-term stress is probably fairly low, in that cattle, once they know what that is, might have short-term elevated stress, but it goes down relatively quickly.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the meadow research that we've been doing up here, there's a long history of research looking at different grazing strategies on meadows and uplands here at the Gudmundsen Sandhills Lab, and how to incorporate both haying and grazing within those systems. Sandhills meadows are extremely important to our ecosystem. Around 10% of the land area out here, highly productive, important for wildlife and a number of other ecosystem services. And so how do we graze those to get the most benefit from a production standpoint, but also maintain some of those ecological values that they have? And so what we were looking at is how does timing of grazing and intensity of grazing on hay meadow regrowth affect subsequent year hay production? And so we looked at a couple different grazing strategies of grazing either in the fall when grass was still green and growing, or waiting until the winter and after grass had been dormant. Then we looked at a heavy and moderate grazing intensity on that. And really what we found is that the following year, timing tended to have more of an influence than intensity of grazing. And so grazing in the fall, when grasses were still green and growing, tended to reduce subsequent year hay production by about 10% compared to waiting and grazing during the winter time after grasses had gone completely dormant. But there was some trade-offs there. Grazing in the fall, we had more biomass as well as a much higher quality of forage available. And so thinking of that in terms of those trade-offs, grazing is an important benefit in the fall and the winter, and there might be some opportunities that you can rotate that would help so you don't lose as much of that grass production later that next summer. And then lastly, our long-term biomass, we've collected data here since 2004 to basically track how different precipitation, temperature, other weather variables affect our plant production in the uplands sandhills. And so we have a pretty rich data set there. We're learning more and more about how dynamic that is going through these drought and wet cycles. As well as more and more about how the interplay between our C3 cool season grasses and our warm season grasses interact with one another in terms of certain wet years and dry year conditions. And so we continue to do that. This year, we've had decent precipitation. It's looking to be a fairly average year in terms of our production. That long-term data set's been pretty valuable in helping us understand the plant community out here better.
What's the next step after you do these kinds of research projects? And I guess kind of the question becomes, why is it important you're doing so? How can you extend that information out to the producers, a lot of them here today that need that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we try to be is producer focused, try to get after the questions that we're getting calls about, and we're getting asked about. And so we try to get this data obviously here at the open house to try to share what we're learning and to ask producers really like what are questions that you have and what better ways can we understand this. And so with the virtual fence, we get a lot of calls about that. It's new technology, so a lot of people have questions like, is this working right, or what the cost is, and those types of things. So it allows us to really answer some of those questions or give them some direction on that. The long-term biomass data set that we have, that's always a perennial question, right? Is where am I at in terms of my forage production? Do I need to destock or keep, are we going to be okay this year? And so it helps us better create models that we can better pinpoint that this might be going into a drought year based on things like Eric Hunt's talking about today in the weather. That we can then say this is how it relates to our plant biomass. And then these long-term grazing strategy studies are really what we need to do to see what long-term effects certain types of grazing is. And so ranches like the Gudmundsen Sandhills labs are critical to that research because we try to make them as close to a production scale or a production type operation here in the Sandhills. So the hope is that data, that research, that information that we get can be directly related to what a rancher is facing day to day and can tie into how they make the decisions on their operation.
Always good to catch up with the folks at the Gudmundsen Sandhills Laboratory. Want to let you know, mark your calendar for the 2025 version of their open house, which is August 20th. We'll have more details on that event as we draw closer. Well, just before seed hit the ground this spring, the Market Journal team, we all traveled out to Denver, Colorado for the 2025 Commodity Classic event. While there, we caught up with a friend of the show, that is Jackson Stansel. He is the founder and chief executive officer of Sentinel Fertigation. With the irrigation season now in full swing across Nebraska, it's a great time to take another look and some of the insights that Jackson shared with us when it comes to making fertigation more efficient. Colonel Jackson Stansel of Sentinel Fertigation is joining us. And Jackson, we followed you over the years as you had developed this product out of the University of Nebraska with some of your studies there. You all work to deliver nitrogen fertilizer right on time to help avoid farmers overusing fertilizer. They don't want to. It costs them a lot of money, and you help provide some data through satellite imagery, right?
That's right.
To avoid doing that. How do you do so?
So, Bryce, what we do is we ask our farmers to put in high and low check plots in the field. We call them collectively Sentinel plots. We use these Sentinel plots to calibrate every satellite image that comes into our program. We also use it to calibrate a back-end crop and soil nitrogen dynamics model. We track nitrogen sufficiency over the course of the season. When we see that sufficiency is dropping, we encourage a farmer to make an additional nitrogen application. And if that sufficiency never drops, we encourage them not to apply again because they have enough out there on the field. And ultimately, it results in very profitable outcomes. We're seeing about $24 per acre improvement in profitability, and it results in more efficient outcomes as well. We're seeing consistently over 20% improvement in nitrogen use efficiency.
This is our Conservation Corner segment here on Market Journal, and managing nitrogen and your use is a matter of conservation, especially in Nebraska, where we have had some issues with that in the past. Talk about how your product is addressing that.
Absolutely. Groundwater quality is a huge issue in Nebraska, and even if you look nationwide, groundwater quality is a big deal, as is surface water quality. The Nebraska Corn Board was instrumental in funding the research that actually went into developing In Time, which is our solution that uses the satellite imagery to guide nitrogen applications. Ultimately, what we believe is if you are making in-season applications and applying the right amount of nitrogen at the right time for the crop, you're minimizing the amount of nitrogen that is stored in the soil and it's exposed to the risk of leaching or running off of the field. And so if you're able to do that, you can really possibly reduce your nitrogen rate, but at the very least mitigate your leaching risk and help keep those concentrations of nitrate that can have human health impacts low within the groundwater and surface water.
One of the things we want to highlight today is that you are still signing up growers for 2025. What does that process look like?
So if you're a grower that's interested in using this technology to benefit your profitability and your efficiency, what I would highly encourage you to do is, number one, go to our website. We have a form where you can contact us and we can kind of talk to you more about how that might look in your operation. And two, look locally for your certified service provider from our Century Network. We do have agronomists, ag retailers, independent crop consultants throughout the state that are able to service and sell our solution to you. And we'd be happy to link you to the list of those providers. Just talk to some of your neighbors as well. There's a chance that one of them has used the technology and may be able to give you some firsthand insights into how it's worked for them.
Nebraska had a program, I know it's closed at this point, but the Nitrogen Reduction Act that helps offset some of these funds, correct?
Absolutely. The Nebraska Nitrogen Reduction Incentive Act provides between $10 and $15 per acre, depending on which phase area that you're in for nitrogen management in the state. Applications closed this past year on January 15th, but they will be reopening as we head into the next year. So if this is something that you're considering, I would highly encourage you to apply. Technology fits the program quite well.
Curious your thoughts as you've worked with largely Nebraska farmers at this point, their reaction to seeing the amount of money they can save, but also they don't have to apply as much fertilizer as once thought. What kind of feedback do you hear?
Our farmers love it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of shocking the first year that you go through the program, right? You kind of have to rethink how you think about nitrogen management. There's no yield goal, there's no soil sampling that you have to do. So it is really a big paradigm shift. But I think once farmers see that they can reduce a little bit, it kind of encourages them to start saying, okay, what else do I need to take a look at? How much farther can I go? And really, what does optimizing my nitrogen look like in my operation?
Now, if you'd like some additional information about Sentinel Fertigation and the impact they can have on your operation, visit their website, sentinelfertigation.com. Of course, we talk about irrigation season that typically brings out plenty of heat, and with it, flies. When temperatures have climbed like they have lately, they become quite a nuisance for cattle in particular. Our next story takes us to the West Central Research Extension Education Center near North Platte, where we visited with Extension educator Dave Boxler to get some strategies to mitigate flies and keep those herds healthy.
It's no question that moisture has been a blessing for crops in western Nebraska this year, but for cattle, not so much. Stable fly population has been on the rise, and the number of them have been greater than normal. Over the past few weeks, the horn fly is also on the rise. It's encouraged for producers to apply a means of fly control.
Well, certainly, especially in the west central to western part of Nebraska, we've had an abundance of rainfall, which has actually helped produce a very substantial stable fly population for our pasture cattle. And we're experiencing numbers like I have not seen before because of the moisture and the material that they develop in. We had a lot of cattle cattlemen feeding hay during the winter time, and some of that gets spilled out, and if we get enough moisture on it, that provides a very good medium for stable fly development, which we have seen now. I've heard reports ranging from Cook, Nebraska, all the way up to Chadron, experiencing significant stable fly numbers. And our own research cattle here, we have numbers that I have not seen before on our pastured cattle. So the ingredients were all there. The eastern part of the state, not so much. You guys are experiencing some drought issues there, so stable flies are a little bit lower. But I have heard reports in the northeast part of the state where numbers are fairly high in feedlots. Now, switching gears to another pasture fly is the horn fly, which stays on the animal almost exclusively. It's a very small fly, and most of the time producers will see them on the backs and sides of animals. And we have seen numbers increase rather dramatically over the last 2 weeks. If producers have not applied any method of fly control to this point, I would encourage them to do something. There we have a variety of different methods, and it all depends on their management system as to which one is going to work. But it is critical to provide some means of fly reduction out there, because both fly species impact animal behavior and animal productivity. So I would encourage our producers to do something.
Face flies have been a problem as well. They usually peak in late July and into August. Drought situations in the eastern part of the state could reduce the face fly population, as moisture is a big factor in its life cycle.
We have seen a few face flies starting earlier this week. I would expect to see numbers increase as we move into July. Normally, here in the west central part of the state, we see face fly numbers kind of peaking in late July and early August. Now that may shift because of the weather that we've had this spring, but historically, face fly numbers are always present in the eastern part of the state because of higher moisture situations. That may change a bit this year if they remain in a drought, because they have a little bit longer life cycle, and if moisture isn't there, the manure pat will dry out before the larvae complete their development. So a lot of it depends on Mother Nature. The fly life cycle is very dependent on moisture and heat to complete its life cycle. So there's a few things that could happen between now and the end of July, and it just remains to be seen what our weather patterns will do.
As we move through the summer months, it's highly encouraged that cattle producers use some method of fly control. Weather has been a big reason that flies are on the rise this season, and they could be a factor in reducing the production of your cattle.
Now, if you'd like some more tips when it comes to managing flies in your cattle operation, be sure to check out the website beef.unl.edu. Finally, today on our broadcast, we're taking a look back at last year's harvest and a piece of equipment that turned a lot of heads. It's called the Outrun grain system. Besides looking pretty slick, this innovation could actually reduce the manpower needed to get through harvests. My colleague from the Rural Radio Network, Chad Moyer, brings us this story.
A new tool in the toolbox for farmers, specifically helping with harvest. If you had to describe Outrun, how would you do that?
Outrun is an autonomous system that allows all infield applications of the grain cart to be done with nobody in the tractor, all controlled from the combine.
What is this designed to do? What should happen when you use Outrun?
It will allow the combine driver to have complete control of that grain cart, not have to go on the radio and tell anyone where to be. He can just put that cart wherever they want it.
Okay, well, show us. Can you show us how it works? Give us kind of a walkthrough and explain what you're doing.
So as you can see here on the app, we've got the field boundary here at this dealership. So what we're going to do here is you can see the cart location, the combine location, and then this here is our truck zone. We'll get to that in a minute. So what you can do here is there are three main tasks: staging cart, ready to fill, and then send a truck. So for stage cart, we're going to select that task, and then we're going to drop a pin and you can change the direction that you want it to end, what direction you want it facing. So we're going to drop it here in the field. I'm going to select staging, and then the tractors receive the task, and it's going to execute that task, and it's going to end up over there on that end of the field.
And so just you doing that right here in front of us, it didn't take very long for you to give the command and for the tractor to respond.
Correct. Once the task has been sent to the tractor, there is a 3-second delay for it to notify the surroundings. The alarm will go off and the hazards will start flashing, and then it will start executing the task.
Okay, so now you're extending the auger arm out.
Yes, so I've extended the auger. The grain tank's full. I know I need the grain cart to come for an unload, so I'll hit the ready to fill button here on the tablet. It's going to plan a path, and it's going to come a line underneath the auger here.
Let's say, okay, so again, thinking practically, you're more than likely taking out 12 or however many rows of grain, 16 rows or whatever it might be, and then you just go over and you touch that pad and say, hey, I'm full.
Yep.
And then here it comes.
And then it will line up underneath the auger. And then we will change on the app here to this alignment view. So now you have full control of where you're filling into the grain cart. So you can move that unload point so that you can most optimally fill that grain cart better than you can with an operator where you're giving hand signals back and forth or going over the radio saying move forward, speed up, slow down, whatever it might be. And with that, the grain cart also is paired to the combine. So if we speed up, the grain cart is going to speed up with us to keep that point. And as we slow down, it will slow down with us in order to keep that unload point so we don't have to worry about spilling grain. And if the combine were to come to a stop, say I got plugged, say something happens, I need to come to a stop, the grain cart will also come to a stop at that time, and it will basically cancel that task and wait for you to call it again.
Pretty cool to get up close and personal with that technology. If you'd like to learn more, visit the website outrunag.com. That is going to do it for this week's edition of Market Journal. I want to let you know that next week we'll be back with all new content. And if you missed one of our stories, we encourage you to rewatch the entire program anytime on YouTube and on Acres TV. Hope to see you right back here next time. But until then, I'm Bryce Duskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.